Sorry, just getting my situation set up. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am great. I'm excited to continue our conversation of St. Louis craft beer scene.
Me too. I didn't say anything offensive about St. Louis last week, and I'm excited to be nice again this week.
Indeed. And so we have a awesome we have a guest this evening as well, correct?
True.
But I think we should just hold off just a minute because it's just 8:30. People are probably getting ready. If you haven't, time to crack open some beers. Love to hear where people are tuning in from. Where are you tuning in from today, Todd?
I am in Graceland, which is Memphis, Tennessee.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah.
What
Where are
brings
you?
what brings you to Memphis?
Great question, Chad. In 3 to 4 short weeks, City Brew Tours will be launching our newest franchise location in Memphis, Tennessee. So if you want to go to some of the great breweries that I visited today, you can come on down to Graceland and get some behind the scenes access here. Awesome beer so far.
Well, that does sound like a good time, and we're very excited to have Memphis launching soon. So we've got people coming in from California. We got Akron, Ohio. Dan's never been to Memphis, so and it sounds like Dan, you have an excuse to go now.
And the barbecue is as good as advertised. So good.
So it's not just the hype; it's actually that good.
Actually good. And Todd's stamp of approval.
So we're drinking tonight two different breweries from our St. Louis Beer Club. We've got Perennial, which I'm very excited for. It's their Saison de Lis, and this beer is brewed as a saison that's brewed with chamomile. So if at any point this evening I start to fall asleep, Todd, you know why.
I'm happy that we've found a way to introduce chamomile into your diet.
Chamomile puts me out. So I'm curious to know if the people in the chat are also getting a little sleepy from the Saison de Lis. And then we're also going to be drinking Four Hands, their cast iron. So we'll start with the Saison de Lis just in case the sleepiness sets in later on. Because if it's like alcohol, you want to if it's like a shot, it takes a little while for it to kick in.
And we'll get into the chocolate malts.
Indeed.
Yeah, and for those of you who maybe missed last week and are just catching up with St. Louis, we talked a little bit at the beginning of last week about how important St. Louis is to beer in the US and America. Obviously, a very, very large brewery started in St. Louis, Anheuser-Busch, and it has to do a little bit with the local topography and some of the regional components that St. Louis has to offer, which we'll hear a little bit more about when we bring our guest on. And I'm excited to get into that. So, Chad, should we dive into your chamomile adventure?
Before we do that, I just want to know what was we went through a ton of fun facts about St. Louis last episode, and for anyone that missed it, I think we need like a highlight reel of the best fun fact of
Franny, go back and clip all of the fun facts from last episode and put it on Instagram by the end of the week, please and thank you.
Or fast forward all of the fun facts in a very short time slot for this.
It's the World Chess Hall of Fame. Chad, what's your favorite fun fact?
The 7-Up. The 7-Up is from St. Louis, and I'm blanking on the ridiculous name of 7-Up.
Yeah, it was really long. But shout out to Orlando Jones and make 7-Up yours.
All right, should we get into this beer?
Let's do it.
All right. I know this is not the appropriate glassware. This is an IPA glass, but it's what I had.
What I wonder what the fair punishment is for improper glassware.
For talking Hammurabi's code, I think you would have to lay on the glass.
Just
Like
walk on broken glass,
instead of walking on coals, you have to walk on broken glass.
like Die Hard.
Exactly.
So Chad, we have a Belgian style saison. We're gonna get what are we gonna look for color wise here?
Oh, that smells delicious. So color wise, I mean, saisons are typically not this. The clarity on this thing is insane.
I can see you through it.
Yeah, saisons usually don't have this type of clarity. They usually have things suspended like wheat proteins. So this is right here, just on the first like view of this. They're either doing some kind of filtration at Perennial, or they are just letting this sit for a little while in the tanks and letting gravity do its part. Because like, look at that thing. That's
pretty clear.
clear. That's probably going through some kind of centrifuge to get it that clear.
So tell me, speaking of saisons, they're using a traditional saison yeast strain here, and I think for anyone who's having it, that's if you're getting those fruit and spicy notes, that sort of balance that tea from the chamomile. That's directly from the yeast. And Chad, give me the finish.
So saisons are typically saison yeast come off with that peppery herbal characteristic. Something that happens with saisons. Those saisons are a farmhouse ale, and they can ferment at very high temperatures. So at those temperatures, that's when you're getting a lot of those esters being produced and phenols that are coming from it. So I haven't even tasted this. I've just been enjoying the chamomile. I'm again a little nervous. If I just pass out, you'll know why.
That's okay. There's medicine. Smelling salts like a injured football player.
Oh, that is so delicious. That for a saison, like this is a really clean saison. Dan says way less funk than he'd expect from a saison. This is like one of the cleanest saison I think I've ever tasted, which makes it super crushable for during summertime. Usually saisons can be, I mean, saisons were the farmhouse ale for the field hands. This is the beer. If I had to go work the fields, this is the beer that I want for my farmhouse ale. It has very low. I think the chamomile is just really smoothing out this and mellowing out that saison yeast that creates all of those different peppery flavors.
Mm-hmm. I'm laughing at you in the fields, like retiring to your house for a.
I have my plow. I've got my is a hoe? Is that hoe?
Yeah, sure.
My
5%.
Yeah, 5%. So typically with saisons, those can range anywhere from like high fours all the way. I've seen 7-8% saisons. So they just kind of run the gamut.
So let's talk a little about Perennial, Chad. And I think what we do here is we're going to give a nice overview, and then we might bring in an expert.
I think that's a good plan.
So husband and wife duo, Phil and Emily Wymore. Phil's been brewing professionally for 7 years. He
got his start Goose Island, Half Acre. Did some stints there before starting Perennial.
Yep. and their location is a former Coca-Cola syrup plant, which is between the 7-Up and the Coca-Cola syrup plant. A lot of pop stories coming out of St. Louis. So, Chad, do you want to introduce
a lot of Belgian, and then more American styles too? I think like this is one of their nod to their Belgian origins. They're definitely looking at that more traditional Belgian profile.
So why don't we promote? Why don't we turn someone into a panelist here to have a further conversation about Perennial and beer in St. Louis?
I think we can do that. Let's do that.
Also, I don't know if while you're doing that, there was a moment in the chat where RJ went to the same high school. He's quote a long time ago, not my words, that Eleanor's daughter graduated from. So small world.
We're working.
He's on his way.
Oh, there he is.
There he is.
So I missed 2 seconds on there, but I know when you guys were talking about Perennial, what else do you want to know about them? Because I can keep going on.
First, I think we need to introduce
right.
you, because like, who did we just bring on to this podcast? No one really knows. But we definitely brought a beer expert, a St. Louis beer expert. So
Jesse Stansbury. Jesse, give us the elevator pitch. Who are you?
I am a beer lover at heart on here who loves the beer community. Will never brew beer because I've tried home brewing and I suck at it. But I love what the culture and art is of breweries. And I felt that St. Louis needed somebody out there doing beer tours. So there wasn't anything there. So I started it up. And I said, if I'm going to do a beer tour thing on here, I'm going to do it the way a beer dork like I would want to go on, and go to a whole, but keep small groups on here, go to pretty much every brewery I can go to, and make it a good time for people. There's your elevator pitch.
And so Jesse is the owner and founder of Brew Hop STL. So when we were thinking about who do we want to bring in to talk about St. Louis beer, as city brew tours, we know that a brewery tour operator is going to have the handle on what St. Louis's craft beer scene has to offer. And just to plug Brew Hop STL, they actually, when we were researching who we were going to bring on, Brew Hop STL goes to 68 breweries in the greater St. Louis area on their tours. So we have a lot to talk about. I think we're going to probably be here till midnight we're going to talk about all 68.
Not if you finish the chamomile beer. So Jesse, let's start with Perennial. We mentioned husband and wife team, old Coca-Cola plant. What do you love about Perennial? Why do guests like it?
Well, I mean, their main thing on here is their sour beer program, which is what they pretty much have perfected. Then their barrel aging program. I mean, they have foeders in there that are 40-something years old. Then they have their entire, I mean, one of the top rated beers out there is Abraxas. So you'll see that all over the place on here. That's one of the greatest things. Well, and now you have to go back to, well, here, let's give you the whole background spiel on here. Back in, I think it was 2011, especially because you're going to talk about Four Hands, people don't realize that there was really only a couple breweries in St. Louis. I mean, you had Anheuser-Busch, of course, and then you had Schlafly, who came in on here. But it wasn't until 2011, within 4 months of each other, Perennial, Four Hands, Urban Chestnut, and Civil Life all opened, which was like the big thing on here. These big major breweries all opened up on here, and it just popped the industry on here. Now, as far as Perennial goes, number one, they're amazing on here. They have their main location down in South City. Then they opened up, there's a tap house for them out in a winery, Chandler Hill Winery out in middle of St. Charles County out there. Then they opened up their second brewery in the city on here, which is Perennial and Lockwood. Then they also have another tap house, which I'm forgetting exactly where it's at. But Perennial, the other really good thing about the brewery community in St. Louis is everybody is friends, and it's almost like a soap opera of who goes where and opens up what. So I could tell you Perennial on here, that's where their assistant brewer and then head brewer on here at one point in time was Corey King, who, if you're any kind of beer fan, you know who he is. It ended up being to where he was doing such a good job and he kept brewing on the side, and had his own little brewery of stuff on here, and he started calling it Side Project. Well, eventually Side Project spun off of Perennial, and then you have Side Project and Shared. And then keep going forward on here. I can tell you like Dave, who's the head brewer over at Well Spent Brewing, which is another one in St. Louis. His roots were in Perennial. That's where he started out as an apprentice at one point in time. You had about a year and a half, well, it's been almost 2 years now. One of the new cool breweries in St. Louis, which is Rockwell, which is really cool because it's built out of cinder blocks and shipping containers. Their brewers on there all came out of Perennial. You just have a whole community of brewers out there who all know each other and kind of go from there.
So it sounds like Perennial really laid the groundwork for the explosion in craft beer, being like Urban Chestnut, Perennial, Four Hands, all kind of coming up at that same time.
You have Schlafly, who did all the legal background, proved that you can have your own tap house and self-distribute. And then these other guys all started opening up, and it just branched out from there. So
you mentioned Abraxas. Now, Abraxas for anyone who's never had it, is a 99 on Beer Advocate, which is unheard of out of 100. So it's considered world-class beer. Can you tell everyone what is Abraxas? Like what is the essence of Abraxas? Because every year it changes a bit, right?
Well, your base thing on Abraxas is you have Maman, which is the base stout that Perennial does on here. I can't tell you exactly what all is added into Abraxas that makes it different on here, but the biggest thing on here is it has chili in it. So there's that little bit of, you have the sweet in the front, and then you have that just a mild little bit of heat in the back. But then what happens every year is what Perennial does is they have their release on here, which you have your base Abraxas, and then they usually do 3 different variants that comes with it. It could be coffee. It could be, they've done salted caramel on it. They just did one with Vietnamese coffee beans variation to it. So they do all the different variants. Plus, they also barrel age it for a year. And if you're lucky enough to get a barrel aged Abraxas, that's why I pay X amount of dollars every year to be a member on here, which is basically, I get all the other beers, but that's what I really want. Barrel aged Sump is good. Barrel aged, everything else is good, but that's the one everybody wants, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty prime time. Any beer that can have such a following like that gets people to try to weasel their way into by paying money for other parts of the program, that's how you know it's good. I've long said I'll buy any beer that people are waiting in line for, which I think that's going on now. Is that right?
It's back to lines thing on here. Yeah, they're starting to do different lines outside in St. Louis. Yeah.
But is Abraxas, the release is right around now, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's usually in October. So yeah, it'll be coming up here.
Yeah, so anyone who needs to get down to St. Louis, they should get down there. And so I alluded to some before we get into the second beer. I alluded to something at the top of the show about St. Louis and a little bit about the geographic location. And I would like to talk about caves. I like to go splunking. Is that what it's called?
Spelunking, yeah.
Spelunking. Yeah, as a big spelunker, I just want to spend the next 20 minutes talking about caves. So, what, as I understand it, St. Louis has lots of caves. And how did that work its way into the beer community? What's the interplay between my career as a spelunker?
Well, to kind of get into that, you have to go to, I mean, you have the big guy in town. You have AB out there who, I mean, it used to be Anheuser-Busch and Falstaff was in there. You had the Lemp Brewery on here. All these guys came in on here right at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. AB became the big one. And the reason being is because you have all the German immigrants who settled in St. Louis, mainly because the climate and the tear of the soil and everything else was very similar to what's in the Rhineland. But the real appealing thing is, yes, St. Louis per capita has more underground limestone caves than anywhere else in the world, which I thought was crazy when they told me about it when we went to Earthbound and stuff like that. But I had to look it up and no, it's true. And caves, especially limestone caves, make absolutely perfect lagering cellars, which is what started happening. These guys on here. One little cool fact is here at in the 1900s on here, early 1900s, there was actually more than 100 breweries within the city limits of St. Louis, because you'd have a brewery that was basically just doing lagers and ales. Two beers on here. They wouldn't really cellar them too much. I mean, they'd cellar them, but they wouldn't. They didn't have all the filtration or anything on it, so it was basically brew it, drink it quick on here. So you had all these beer gardens all over the place. So there was literally a beer garden every 3 to 4 blocks around the entire city, because that's where everybody went after work. So that's why you have, as you go around the city on here, you'll see streets named after the breweries on here. That's what Cherokee Street Brewing, I mean, Cherokee Street is named after the brewery on here. You have, there's a bunch more on here, but that's what it is. That's how the city was laid out. We were a bunch of beer drinking people at the turn of the century. Which I was, when you mentioned, yeah, there's, 68 some odd breweries that we go to on here. There used to be a 2/3, I mean, 2 to 3 times that many just within the city limit. Because that's what you did. You went to all those breweries on here. But yeah, there is limestone caverns all over the city on here. They actually don't know where they're all at. They're not all excavated out on here. In fact, what one of the things they made you do on here was, if you were going to build upon where you knew one of those cave systems was, you had to actually take the building that you were going to tear down and bust it all down there and dump it into the caves, and fill up the caves with that debris. Because I mean, you have every once in a while here, it's usually about every 2 years or so, you'll see all of a sudden like a giant sinkhole to show up somewhere, and it's basically because the ground caved out into the down into the thing. I know the one funny thing on here, they still have it kind of open, I think, was right in the middle of the park outside of Clark Street, right there by Union Station. But just the ground just fell away on here, went down into these caves. Just happens, but they don't know how. And
That
they
is
don't know how far you can get in between them and where they're all linked to, or how far you can go, or anything on here. But they're everywhere.
that is crazy. Just a sinkhole where you never know when it's going to happen in St. Louis.
I didn't know I had another thing to worry about.
Yeah, in fact, I had a friend of ours who.
That's the new fun fact, that you never know when you're going to fall into a sinkhole.
Yeah, you got houses in the old part of the city on here where their structures and stuff like that, their houses will shift, and they're like, well, why is this happening on here? I'm like, because you're probably falling into a hole. I mean, because you have the grounds on here will shifting on here, and that's what happens.
That is crazy.
Why you can't figure out why your drywall keeps cracking? It's because your house is shifting.
I would like to ask the chat, because I researched this. How many caves are in the state of Missouri? Any guesses?
Sounds like a ton, based on the fact that you could just kind of fall into one at a moment's notice.
Ryan's got 352.
Brian, I would guess you're 5% of the way there.
Any other guesses? And Jesse did say that St. Louis has more caves than anywhere in the world, cave cavern systems. So right.
Well,
Okay.
per capita, per our size and per population, yeah. So
So, oh, Pat says 27.
No, Pat said
Eric,
2,756.
Eric may have Googled it because we gave enough time for people to respond. But Eric, ding ding ding, Eric wins. There are 7,000 caves in the state of Missouri. So
Way too many.
more than I thought.
Chad, what do you say? Should we dive into forehands?
think so. Do I need to finish I'm gonna finish my chamomile because I want to have a nice night though first.
Okay, so while Chad drinks his warm glass of milk before bed. So this is another 2011 brewery. And I think, yeah, Chad, there you go. So what do we have for cast iron? It is an oatmeal
Brown ale.
So an oatmeal brown ale, is that when you take Quaker oats and then you add brown ale to a bowl? Is that an oatmeal?
And brown food coloring with a
Got
quart.
it.
No, this is going to be, it's going to be similar to an oatmeal stout, but it's not going to have the same opacity that stouts have. It's not going to have as much body. So it's going to drink more like a light porter. And there's an obnoxious amount of chocolate malts. These glasses are not.
Is an obnoxious amount of chocolate malt, is that a technical quantitative figure? At a certain point does it cross into obnoxious realm?
According to forehands, it is. But chocolate malt is not the same as chocolate, like cacao and roasted barley, same thing. So chocolate malt is just malt that's been roasted fairly dark, but not to the point of combustion, which is like more roasted barley.
So, all right, Jesse, we're going to tap you again. Give us your forehands. Love. What do people love about it?
Well, forehands is probably, outside of Schlafly, it's probably one of the most widely distributed beers out there. Well, actually, you being a Chicago guy, I know one of the things on here is they do their citywide, and they did not think it would sell well in Chicago, but it's their number 2 outside of St. Louis location that they sell it at. I forget how many bars that they say actually have it on tap on here, but there's your one little thing on here that that's always stuck out that I thought was crazy.
Can you share, just for the audience, because citywide is a really interesting project that Forehands has done, because when I was looking into Forehands, it sounds like, can you tell a little bit more about
it's their basic lager. They do a citywide, well, they have an APA, they do a lager, and they do a Pilsner on it, but it's their series on it. And it's essentially, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's everything that gets sold off of it, they have a fund that goes back into to fund different projects for the community. It's their charity beer, is pretty much what you could say. That's why they sell it everywhere. Every non-for-profit center thing in St. Louis, like here, even when my wife and I, we go to the Fox for the theater, every ball game, everything on here, they also will sell a citywide on here, and every bit of whatever the percentage of the profits off of that all goes right back to the community on whatever various projects that are going on. So it's cool.
Yeah,
you feel good about drinking beer.
I couldn't, when I was looking, they already partnered, it looks like, with 25 different nonprofits, and they've brought in over $300,000 from this. So if you see a citywide, not only is it just an American lager that tastes delicious and crisp, but you also know that you're giving back to a local St. Louis community, which I think is just awesome. Just like this delicious beer.
So Chad, tell me a little bit about tell me about food pairing. Someone mentioned in the chat that the can recommends food pairing, and as you're our in-house cicerone, this is sort of like this is why you took the test. So, one, read them off the can, and then two, tell me why they work. No, you're not very good at that. Nope. No, it's worse. There you go.
Got it. So on the can, it says charcuterie and hearty stews, which again, like you were saying, I wish more cans had beer and food pairings because beer is actually more versatile to pair with food than wine is. And that's like blasphemy in the wine circles, but it's true. Beer during with the roasting of the malts, the kettle caramelization happening, you get so many more flavors. And so when you're talking about a beer like this is going to have the oatmeal gives it some body. So you're going to want something that's going to be able to keep up with the intensity of this beer. So you want to, when you're talking about pairing beer with food, you want to think about matching intensities. And so that's why if you look on that can, they say hearty stews, a hearty beef stew or a charcuterie. Those are going to have that kind of same intensity. You're not having a salad with this beer. Like if you're to drink this beer with a salad, the salad would have no flavor profile whatsoever because this beer, just that amount of chocolate malt and roasted barley is going to overpower the salad. So I agree, the hearty stew, kind of that the beef in a hearty stew is going to have that same, the fat, the intensity, the what's the word, that just heartiness of body of that stew is going to go really well with this. Also something sweet, dulce de leche. Love that. There's some caramel notes when you drink this. So that would go really well with some kind of caramel dish.
So Jesse, we on our tours, we're huge fans of a beer and food pairing. We've done a ton of them, and so we all sort of have our favorites. Do you have a favorite beer and food pairing?
Jeez. I mean, pizza goes well with everything. No, actually, my more thing on here is what beer am I going to drink with what cigar, actually. So that's usually what I'm going with. Is am I going to do a stout with a cigar? Am I going to do an IPA? Which one's going with what?
How do you pair cigars with beer? Is there some kind of theory behind that?
No. I don't know.
I was like, how do you pair like a Goza? What kind of cigar are you pairing a Goza?
Probably something
Berliner Weiss.
I mean, you go with a Maduro, you go with something darker on here is usually what I do, something with a little more oily to it. But yeah, and then it's pretty much, do you want a more heavier roasty one on here? Do you want something lighter and sweeter? Yeah, I don't know. It's an experiment. I don't think anybody actually has a rule book for how to pair beers and cigars. It's all whiskey and scotch and cigars.
This is your calling, I think. You need to write the beer and cigar pairing.
I'm not very good at it.
I don't think there's I think no matter what, it's gonna work.
Eye of the beholder, right? Interesting you said that. I've been in Memphis for less than 12 hours. I've been to we visited 6 breweries today. Every single patio, there were people smoking cigars with ashtrays for cigars, which is not a thing where I live. Is that a thing in St. Louis? Is this,
not all of them, but yeah, there is a lot. There's a lot of them actually. I could think of like Crossroads Brewing out in St. Charles County on here. They actually have a whole thing on Sunday afternoons. There's cigars on the patio thing where you get you know, they put if you have a cigar, you get a special little beer flight, and then they kind of curate it to what your cigars are.
That is
There's
so
quite
cool.
there's probably 6 to 8 brews that I could think of off the top of my head that actually have humidors in the breweries where you can buy a cigar to go smoke outside.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Well, it's a big thing. I mean, I could tell you in Nashville on here, I was out having a cigar in the patio of one of the local breweries here last night. Yeah.
Do you think it's the barbecue or the cigar culture that's bringing that together? Because it seems like what you're saying, like St. Louis, Memphis, these are all barbecue locales that you go for good barbecue. You
Just
get
good,
the
clean living.
smokiness. Is it just people like smoke in these cities, and cigars happen to be one of those?
I don't know, because now I'm thinking about it. Because the other big place that I go to a lot on here, I see it in Kansas City, which is also a big cigar thing. I mean, a big barbecue one. So maybe you're more into that than
And
I
like
don't know.
I've been to so many beer cities, and I'd never like literally I was struck that the fifth place, I was like, am I in the twilight zone? Like what's happening? So yeah, I'm very curious, but maybe there is, Chad, you're right. Maybe there is a connection between barbecue, cigars, and beer, which like there are worse connections in the world.
Yeah, I've never actually really thought about it. I mean, I travel a lot. Like, I mean, I'm in Cincinnati and Louisville last week, and there was no breweries out there with cigars. I don't know. Maybe you caught on to it. I don't know.
I've never been to a brewery, and I've been to a lot of breweries, and seen a humidor or a cigar program or anything. So I think this is uncharted territories.
Look at us.
I think
We're on to something.
I think we're onto something. This is
Tune in next time where we peel back another layer of the cigar beer connection.
It sounds like Brew Hop STL may need a beer and cigar tour. There.
We've talked about it.
The van would
figure this
probably
out.
be.
So
There are other smoking types of tours. I think that would be a more appropriate one for a brewery tour.
So before we head off into the or it's dark out, before we head off into the evening, Jesse, tell us where people can find you, what you have coming up, where come to St. Louis, take a tour, tell them.
I mean, pretty much on here, you can just go to our website at brewhopstl.com. I mean, we're on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff on here. And then we post our tour schedule usually about 2 months in advance, and every tour is different. Because yeah, like I said, we do tours Saturday noon to 4, and one from noon to 4, one from 5 to 9. It's no more than 12 people to a tour. You get a full beer at each stop, and we go to 4 different breweries on each tour, and we rotate them through. So you can come on 6 different ones and not go to the same brewery.
It's amazing.
And maybe have a cigar with Jesse at one of the breweries.
You can enjoy if you can roll at each brewery for about 45 minutes. So it depends on how good your cigar is. So
I don't know the typical speed of cigar smoking, so I will go from there. But thank you, Jesse, so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Okay.
Have a great night, and we'll see you when we're down in STL next time.
Okay. Thank you.
And for everyone else, if you're listening on a podcast or watching on the Zoom, if you're on the podcast, shop.citybrewtourist.com. To join the beer club, you can get the beers we mentioned in this stream sent to your house on a monthly basis. And Chad, do you want to tell them what, or we're not teasing next month? Is it a surprise?
No, there's no more surprises for the beer club.
Oh, that's right. Where is it?
And you can just go and get, if you're not a subscribed member yet, you can just go to shop.citybrewtours.com and see what our next city is. And that is going to be Seattle. So What a crap.
Seattle's as far from me geographically as you can be.
The question is, will there be cigars
In Seattle,
in Seattle? Not known for the barbecue. So we'll find out if the connection
fish.
is truly there.
You gotta throw a fish. That's my only Seattle association.
RJ, we're still figuring out hosts, so you may see us again. It's going to be a surprise. You'll have to tune in a little bit and find out.
We're keeping you on your toes in that regard. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Chad, as always, a pleasure to chat with you. Excited for Seattle.
I will see you soon. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.